Let's try Miss Charity Adams one more time.
Miss Charity
Miss Charity Adams.
Adams.
What you doing over there looking like that?
Ooh, but I did like
Sorry.
that man. That
The one who has a wife who was planning to get married.
Moving to Miss Lena. I said, what a handsome black man.
It's the accent for me. Hi everybody.
Hi everyone.
Welcome back to Did You See That? I am Bonolo.
And I am Nokolo.
And yeah, today we have an interesting review for you guys. We will be reviewing, drumroll please, the 6888.
Yes. So the 6888 it's executively produced, right?
Directed.
I keep thinking about produced.
Yeah.
But it is directed by Tyler Perry, and it specifically looks at the first Black female Women's Army Corp that is stationed within the U.S. Army in World War II.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, this is a group of Black women soldiers, first of its kind in a time in which America is under segregation, but is also undergoing a war that they are heavily involved in, right? And so the 6888 is led by commanding officer Charity Adams, which is played by the amazing Kerry Washington.
Kerry, shout out
She
Kerry.
is stunning, superb. It follows her leadership and her trying to essentially convince the head of the U.S. Army to allow her team, to the Women's Army Corp, the Black Women's Army Corp, to be allowed to be seconded or moved into one of the areas in which America is fighting a war in. And essentially they get overlooked because of the fact that they are Black women. And so there is a turning point in this entire movie where what ends up happening is that there is huge low morale amongst the soldiers, and also the families of these soldiers are also heavily heartbroken because they don't know whether their children are alive or not.
Yeah.
And this is because the letters are not
reaching the soldiers.
The reason why the letters are not reaching the soldiers is because all of the vehicles and all of the resources that were initially used for sending these letters back and forth between soldiers and their families were now repurposed for the cause of the war.
Yeah.
So what ends up happening is that there is a backlog of letters, right, between the soldiers and their families, and that means that morale is low. They are losing the war. This happens under FDR. Is it FDR?
No.
It is
Roosevelt.
Roosevelt.
Yeah. Roosevelt. Sorry.
Yes.
Franklin.
Your
Americans, please don't come for us. But it happens under Roosevelt.
FDR. I was right about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it happens under Roosevelt, and this is brought to Roosevelt's attention, and there is a suggestion, and this suggestion is brought by Mary McLeod Bethune, which is played by Oprah Winfrey, who was influential under his administration for advocating for Black women's rights.
Yeah.
To use the Black Women's Army Corps to move letters between families and the soldiers. And they are then moved to Italy. Charity Adams and her deputy are flying in with the other commanders. And then what happens is that her army corps is
shipped into Italy.
Transported by ship, by boat.
Which was very interesting symbolism in terms of putting Black people on a ship to go fight wars that are predominantly not necessarily always started by them, but that's a separate conversation. I wanted to add on to that in the backdrop of it following Charity Adams, there's also a storyline that follows Lena, who is a member of the army. and is basically wanting to join the army. And the backdrop of this is that she is dating a gentleman who initially goes off to fight in the war. And Adam. And what's particularly interesting is in the times when he has gone away for the war. So he's a white Jewish man, and she's a black woman. And in the time that he's away at the war, she's constantly worried about, why is he not writing me, etc. Until she gets word that Adam unfortunately lost his life in the war. However, what's interesting is in the time where he loses his life, there is a letter that he was planning to send to Charity. But not to Charity, to Lena.
To Lena, but it never reached.
Never reached her. And so when she gets news that Adam has passed away, she's obviously very devastated by these news, and so she decides to now enroll in the army. And then we find out that she then is under the leadership of Miss Charity Adams.
Yeah. And so, as Bunolo has mentioned, it was just so interesting that the women were brought by boat
to foreign lands
to fight wars that have nothing to do with them. But even beyond that, just the symbolism in terms of America's history with slavery and boats and bringing Black people on boats. And so that was just something that you were mentioning was such a heavy theme.
Yeah, stood out for me.
And stood out for you as well.
Definitely.
And also tied to that is how the head of the army tells Charity that her women soldiers are being brought by boat unsupervised. Again, just a play around power against the assertion of like white male dominance against these Black women not caring or seeing their lives as valuable and shipping them on sea,
but only seeing them as labor,
shipping them in a boat unsupervised, and then saying that when they arrive they better be walking out marching.
Despite all of the conditions that they've faced on their way to this war.
It was actually horrific.
It was wild. It was absolutely wild. But it also just speaks to the whole idea of like Black people having to do 10 times more, even in conditions that are not necessarily suitable, and still expected to be excellent, right? 100%. And then they are excellent, and it's still not recognized as them being excellent.
Because a key running theme is the fact that she always says in the movie that her Army Corp is excellent. They are, but they have to work 10 times as hard only to be considered half as good. Right? And not that they are half as good, but only to be seen as half as good, because in that context and time, the world is not made to recognize the talent and the strengths of Black women. Right? And so that's a running theme throughout the movie. And so they essentially have 6 months to compile these letters and figure out a system as to how they are going to push and move these letters back and forth between families
and get them to the right people.
Initially, Kerry Washington, who plays Charity Adams, thinks this is easy work. You brought us here for letters.
To deliver letters.
That is what an insult. We're the best out of all even the best, if you had to pit us against the white women's Army Corps. But you are bringing us to Italy to funnel letters. And so he basically says you have 6 months. She thinks that's an easy job, only to find out there's like what?
Millions of backlogs of letters,
and millions of bags that they have, millions storage that they have to sift through, and some of the letters are torn. You can't recognize the handwriting. You don't know the location of where these letters are going. You don't know who wrote them because some of the writing isn't eligible. And so they then develop a system into how they can trace these letters. They go from recognizing the scent and trying to compare the scent.
It's absolute genius.
It's so genius, right? So they use scent They tried to look at whether or not the soldiers left clues in the letters that would show them the geography of where they were writing to. In the event where they couldn't find the clues, they opened the letters to read to see if there were any clues around this.
Yeah.
And you could see just how frustrating it was, because in as much as they were working hard, they were trying, they were still being scrutinized
for how they're doing their job.
For how they were doing their job. And firstly, they were set up in quarters in Italy as well. Firstly, they were shipped on a boat. Then they were brought and put into conditions that you an old school that had no heating,
and it was cold.
And the hands of Black women turned that thing into...
Listen, I saw they had a hair salon, I said, they said, we're going to fight, but we're still going to look cute.
We're going to fight, but we're still going to look cute. Did you see?
I loved it.
Did you see their beds?
I loved it.
The rooms. Like, it was... You would look at it and you're like, this is a private school.
Yeah.
Like, they turned it around.
Yeah.
And even in the midst of that, and trying to get these letters back and forth to soldiers that didn't look like them, that were racist towards them, they were still being scrutinized for their living conditions, and why there's a beauty parlor, and why there are perfumes that they're using to trace for the letters.
Which is so interesting, right? Because they were brought there to raise the morale, but nobody's thinking about their morale while being there, right? And so it was also just interesting how they then wanted to carve out an environment for themselves to continue to serve in this war in this way. And also serve in a way that they hadn't initially thought that they would be serving, but still doing it in a way where they dominated still, right? So I just thought that was particularly interesting, the whole concept of you want to boost the morale of the soldiers, but then also in us doing this job, we have to boost our own morale. And so
but no one is
helping us,
pushing us,
doing that, which is a broader conversation on
Black women always needing to uplift people, but
other
nobody
people,
uplifts them.
100%. And I thought that was quite striking as well.
Yeah. And so it's really, a story about hope. It's a story... Resilience.
Yeah.
Triumph.
Yeah.
And also just how hard Kerry Washington in her role fights for these women.
Yeah.
She gets most of the slack. I love that scene where she said to him, "Over my dead body."
She stood up.
It reminds me of the scene of in Hidden Figures.
Yeah. What's her name?
Taraji.
Yeah.
The toilet scene?
Yes.
Where her boss is like, you are never at your desk. It takes you an hour, and she just gives it to him. And I felt that was
similar.
But it was so powerful. In that. So it's really also a story about resilience and also love.
Definitely.
And the importance of connection.
Definitely. And how connection,
and not just romantic love,
but
just
that,
but
familial. Also, and how connection fuels people, right, to continue doing difficult things,
and knowing that they can do hard things.
Yeah. So with that being said, would you?
Oh my God, I just had a shady thought.
What?
Fuels people knowing that they can be out here.
No, knowing that they can be out here. What? Finish the thought.
Killing people in wars.
Oh. To be fair, though, it was Hitler. So, I mean, let's boost the morale, because what else must happen?
Let's leave the politics of the US Army today
aside.
But I mean, I was just saying. But
yeah.
Anyways, Kerry Washington though was
what a stellar performance. And what I particularly enjoyed about her performance is I didn't see her other roles in this performance. And not to say that I've seen her other roles in other performances, but I just really enjoyed how she transformed herself.
Yes.
Her posture was different. Her tone was different. The accent, honey. She
She
got the accent
was, and
down.
you could see her as a commanding officer,
Yeah.
not as, the role she's played in Little Fires. Is it Little
Yeah,
Fires
Little Fires Everywhere.
Everywhere, or
In
in
Ray.
Scandal, in Ray,
Yeah.
in Django, like
Yeah.
all of that.
Very
Like this
different.
was a very striking role, and she bodied every aspect of what it took to play that character.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think she was amazing in that role. Would you recommend the show?
Yes.
Okay.
Initially I was a bit reluctant.
We were both skeptical. When we had to watch it, we were like, well, I was like, not another black people struggling film and like having to be resilient and like, and of course like art imitates life,
and
but
finding like resilience and hope in difficulty,
in difficult things.
because it's just like we've had to see in cinema and in film, we've had to see black people playing that role
over
so often
and over
and
over
over
again.
And it's always been like, why does it always have to be about triumph and struggle?
Yeah, why can't we just be
Thriving,
light and happy? And but that's what I enjoyed also about this film is, even though Charity was fighting a lot of battles, there were moments where we saw her laugh and when we saw her be giddy and laugh and
the
be
same
goofy,
for the rest of the black soldiers
and
as well.
and the same for the rest of them. And I really enjoyed, and I think it was an intentional decision to demonstrate their nuance, right? That they're not just these women that are like gonna, do this very difficult job, but also, like that there's comedy, that there's,
But you could also see how Black Joy was scrutinized.
Oh, 100%.
And like salons were seen as things that like black people shouldn't have,
or trivial,
are trivial things, right? And you see just how black people, these black women, are being heavily scrutinized because they really don't want to be no one wanted them in Italy to begin with. And so everything that they do is scrutinized and argued against in terms of whether they deserve it or not, as well.
Definitely. Yeah, I think I'd also recommend it. I think, yeah, when I first saw the trailer, I was like, I'm not trying to sit through a struggle movie. One, I'm not trying to sit through a 2 hour struggle movie. Number two. But as I watched it, I was like, wow, okay, yeah, this is really cool. And I genuinely enjoy films that are like based on true stories.
Yes.
Because really also it makes you see like that we were there as black people. We were heavily involved. We were fighting wars and all of these things. And this is not written in our history.
They were doing a damn good, excellent job.
Excellent job in acting like we weren't there, but we were there, and we were excellent.
Yes.
In all of that, right?
And I think what was beautiful is that, I don't know if it's beautiful because some would argue like it's just anyways.
Yeah.
Was just how in the beginning of the movie, the white soldiers did not want to salute the Black Women's Army Corps, and at the end of it,
when they've achieved what they need to achieve and exceeded expectations,
to achieve, they got the respect that they deserved, and people who didn't want to salute them saluted them.
Yeah, which speaks to how you constantly have to prove yourself in ways that other people don't.
Your white counterparts do.
White counterparts, just by virtue of being white, it's already assumed that they can do the job and stuff. So yeah, I think I would recommend it if you're looking for feeling hope, triumph,
resilience,
love. Yeah, if you're going through it at work and you're like, actually, let me remind myself of my worth.
If you're going through it at work and like you're like,
you're overlooked,
I've become desensitized to just the things of life and emotion.
Yeah,
this is something to
and my brilliance.
And my brilliance,
because you question that all the time, right? You and I both always speak about, being black corporate girlies in the corporate world and how that has its challenges. And I thought that watching that was like a reminder of like, oh, actually, I belong here, and nobody's doing me a favor by being here. Like,
even if
I'm additive to the space.
Even if they don't see it that I belong here.
Yeah.
outside of their acceptance or validation.
Yeah, definitely. What would you rate the film?
It was a good film.
It was a good film.
It was a good
It was a good
film.
film.
And
Shout
touching.
out, Tyler.
It was shout out
to
Tyler.
you, Tyler.
Shout out to
Because
Raji.
I know you be out here always. Why Taraji?
Eyeball, not Taraji, man.
Kerry
Washington.
Yeah, shout out to you, Kerry Washington and Tyler. I know, Tyler, you always get a lot of flack for like, oh, you're making films that are like black woman caricatures and all of these things.
Within good reason.
But okay, that's a separate conversation, because the fact that there are people that are watching these films means that there are people who feel represented by these films and like want these stories to be told. But that's a separate conversation. I think from an artistic direction and directing perspective, honestly, probably his best work. His best work.
Honestly, his best work. Very touching and just like
I even shed a tear. It was a little
I said, oh! And who knew just like the significance of letters.
Actually, let's get back to writing letters.
Real lovers need to come back.
I love letters.
Yes, this is not what this is about.
Anyway.
But 100%. I'd give it a 10. It was a really good movie.
Yeah,
it was a really good movie.
I'd give it a solid 8.5. Only because I did feel like certain parts were a little bit, and maybe in terms of just the cinematography and the this and the explosions and the, I think the scene with the ship and how it looked, and I was like, okay, it's dramatic. But other than that, I thought the performance was really great. I thought the breaking the seriousness in terms of how it was written, like the script and stuff, especially amongst the women, was really nice. I enjoyed seeing like just the different nuances of the kinds of women that were in the, because at the end of the day, like, these are still black women, and yes, we're showing up in this particular way in this space,
but they have different reasons for why they're showing up.
Exactly. We still, laugh. We still, and I think what was also interesting is like seeing the different reasons as to why people join the army, because that's always been quite interesting to me. Because sometimes I think like if South Africa had conscription, like, or if, like joining the army was never a thing for me, just in my frame of reference. And so what I always find interesting about contexts like the US and stuff like that, I always wonder like, why would people join the army? And it was interesting in this film how we got to see the different reasons in which people join the army, in ways that it's not just patriotism, that's how it's usually marketed, right? But it was interesting to see that like some women joined the army because they wanted to get away from like really toxic relationships. Others genuinely wanted to fight for their country. Others followed love, in the case of like Lena's character. Like, yes, I want to go fight my country, but I also want to go see where my lover died, protecting this country, and so I enjoyed sort of those nuances. So I'd give it a solid 8 out of 10.
The one critique though that I have, that I actually think it might go down to a 9, is so I kind of felt that between the point in which they got to Italy, right, and they needed to like find a way to develop the system, I felt like was a bit rushed to the point in which now, they are getting the recognition that they deserve. And there wasn't enough development around kind of seeing the progress of that system and them, like slowly like triumphing, being triumphant. From like one step onto the next step, onto the next step, and then eventually leading into the delivery of the letters.
So you mean like the small wins?
It felt very, all that there ever was them being heavily critiqued, the commanding officer, coming to do a check, and then her saying, "Over my dead body," and then from there onwards, now there's a system in place of the letters. So I felt like those small wins in terms of the development of that story and that system was a bit rushed.
Okay, so for you, you thought there was heavy emphasis on the challenges and the struggles. We spent
Yes.
a lot of time on that. When it comes to now developing the system, we didn't really see like how that progressed and stuff. And then don't even get me started on the recognition. That was like 2 seconds. Yeah, no, I get that. I get that. But I wonder if that was a directorial decision as well, just because, like I keep saying, like art imitates life. And how many times have you, like even just in your personal capacity, spent a long time trying to wrap your head around something, particularly maybe at work or whatever, and then you do,
don't, and then you do, but then you
and
just get 2 seconds of
you get pizza.
validation.
Thank you. Right? And it's like, okay, we move. You spend bonus. 6 months. You spend 6 months trying to solve this problem, or even less. And then, just honorable mention to Nakala for helping us figure this situation out.
It's been a tough year, but well done, Bunolo.
Yeah, it's been, for hanging in there. Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. I think, I wonder if it was an intentional decision to do that.
It could have been.
Or not.
It could have been, yeah.
Yeah.
But good movie overall.
Yeah. So check it out. It is on Netflix. And that brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you guys for joining us once again. Did you see that?
And let us know what to
like, comment,
subscribe.
And subscribe to the YouTube channel.
And if there's anything you would like us to review next, please
let us know in the comments below. Cheers, everyone.